Hi everyone. Yes, it is that time. Tenant boot camp, working with tenants. It's been a long time coming, but I have figured out that a lot of you are working with tenants, especially as new agents. So I thought I would have a conversation with you about what it's like to work with tenants. So here we go. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about qualifying the tenants or tenant. Required documents, and these are required documents in the state of Illinois. Debt to income ratio for tenants. This is national. Owning your time when working with tenants. The application process, credit report, background check, and Department of Housing. You need to get familiar with HUD. So now you're working with a tenant. What could you be doing? Now, we could take this even in more depth, but when you want to qualify a tenant, you need to talk to that tenant and find out what do you need, when do you really need to be in this rental? Now, in our office, we have a buyer form, a seller form, and a tenant form. So you want to make sure you know exactly what they want and when they need to be in their rental. If someone needs to be in a rental this coming weekend, you're going to be working pretty quickly. And then I always like to ask potential tenants, is there a reason why you don't want to buy? Is there a reason why you don't want to buy a home? And a lot of times you'll find out that someone may not want to buy a home because they didn't know they could. I've worked with people that continue to rent because their parents rented a home, their parents' parents rented a home, they came here from another country, and that person or family did not know that they could probably buy a house. So you should always ask, why don't you want to buy a home? This family that you're working with could be a first-generational home buyer in our marketplace. So at least ask the question. It could be that they have credit blemishes. So is there something you need to know that would prevent a landlord from renting from that person? And I will always ask that question. Now, you might switch this up a little bit. And so notice my last bullet point is ask the tenant to pull their credit at annualcreditreport.com. Everyone, real estate agent, tenant, buyer, seller, everyone should run their own credit every year. So you know if there's something there that you are unaware of. So I always like to ask my clients, when is the last time you pulled your credit? And a lot of times the clients will know, well, I have a 700 credit score. So there really probably isn't a reason why someone wouldn't rent to them. Or you might have someone that'll say, well, I was in a bankruptcy, or I was evicted, or I have a payday loan that I did not pay money for. So you want to ask these questions up front because it will help you better help that tenant when looking for a rental. There are people that rent out their homes. Even me, I rented out my property some years ago because the market had tanked and I knew that I was not going to be able to sell the property to make any money. So I rented out my home. So I was an individual owner that had to rent the home because I didn't want to lose money in a short sale. So many times you'll work with landlords that are individual landlords and they don't do this for a living. They rented out their property because they had to. Now, those are the kind of people that are a lot more strict when they rent out to someone that may have credit blemishes. So always ask the question, is there something I need to know that would prevent a landlord from renting from you? And say, look, everything we talk about is confidential. So you can't share with anyone, not even the landlord, not even the other agent, if your client has bankruptcy, if they have student loans that they're in default with. So you really want to know this because when we talk about how to get that tenant into a property, you can help that tenant make a great qualifying statement to help a landlord choose them. Always explain agency to the tenant and provide the agency document. So we still, just like you work with buyers and sellers, you must explain agency. Okay, required documents. In our state, in the state of Illinois, we use the Consumer's Guide to Agency. You can use an exclusive agency agreement where that tenant decides to work with you exclusively, but you give them the Consumer's Guide to Agency and explain agency. I know many of you are still not explaining it. You're just like, here's the document. Explain agency and explain how you get paid. In our state, we use the lead-based paint brochure and the radon brochure. So even if the property was built after 1978, you must still provide the lead paint brochure and the radon brochure. A landlord does not have to mitigate if there's radon, but the landlord must disclose if there's radon in the home. And if you're moving into a condo building, you do not need the radon report or to disclose radon if the unit is above the second floor. Why? Because radon does not usually sit in units higher up or above ground level. So those are some required documents. Now, locating your rental documents. So you can use your association website. For us, we use Google Drive, so you can go to the Google Drive. You can use the multiple listing service to find all of these documents. It's pretty easy to do. I put them in Google Drive, so you can find all of them. Now, many landlords might use their own lease. So just know, even though you're going to find your paperwork, the rental application, the background check agreement, the lease, you can find all of these documents in our multiple listing service or on Google Drive, but many landlords might have their own document that they are going to give to the client. And you can always ask the real estate agents up front. Now, so even before, and I'll explain this again, even before I talk about debt to income ratio, here's a tip. Get this paperwork ready up front, because when we talk about going to show homes and saving your time as an agent, make sure you have a lot of these documents available, because just like you submit an offer to a listing agent, you can submit a tenant offer with the lease completed, with the application completed, with all the disclosures completed, and the background check completed. So you don't have to wait for that listing agent to provide those documents. Now, when someone wants to rent a home, there's a few ways you can calculate this. You can calculate gross income against a predetermined percentage to determine the maximum amount a renter can afford to pay in rent each month. The industry standard is 30%. So you should not have more than 30% of your income going to your rent. So in other words, no more than 30% of a renter's annual income should go toward housing costs. And the math works like this. So gross annual income divided by 12, and then you'll get your maximum monthly income. So here's an example. An applicant who makes $60,000 could, under this standard, spend $1,500 a month on rent. So what does this mean? If someone made $60,000 a year and you divide by 12, that's $1,500 a month. So there you go. No excuses. Another way to look at this is you could go with the ratio multiplier. So in this instance, the standard multiplier is 3. That means that an applicant should make at least 3 times his or her grossly monthly income to cover rental expenses. The math works like this. So monthly rent times 3, minimum monthly rent. So that would be, if the rent costs $1,500 a month, your income every month should be $4,500. So if your income every single month is $4,500 a month, your apartment cost should not be more than $1,500. So I'm going to go back again. So you could do it this way. The industry standard is 30% of your income. So no more than 30% of a tenant's income should go towards housing costs. All right. And really, when we say $1,500, that depending on where you're renting, this might also include, say, water bill, cable bill, electric bill, the gas bill. So when we say, if the rent on the apartment is $1,500 a month, the applicant's gross income being $4,500 a month, that means everything else should be included, not just the rent, electric, etc. Okay, so here's a guideline. If you don't have a calculator handy, use this chart. So here you go. $40,000 a year, $1,000 for rent. $150, $37.50. Easy to do. You could actually take a screenshot of this and keep it with you if you are working with tenants. So own your time. Now, I always want agents to, our goal is to help protect the consumer and help the consumer get what they want. But as an agent, you don't get paid as much to take out a tenant. So really 1 day for rental showings, 2 at the most, but 1 day. Have your clients pick the best possible rentals that they see on your MLS, on Connect MLS in our market. Have your client pre-fill out the application without the address, because now you can actually have them fill everything out, don't put in the address, and you can make a few copies. And then if they are going to submit an application, they don't have to keep filling that form out again. And you can fill it out for them and type it and then bring a few copies. And ask for a copy of their credit report. So remember, in the beginning, owning your time is knowing what the blemishes are on their credit. So get all of this. 1 day for showings, have your clients pre-fill out the application, and ask your client for a copy of the credit report. Now, let me say this. You as an agent cannot scrutinize their credit report. That's what the landlord does. But the benefit of having a copy of the credit report is you can submit that to the landlord. So if your client has credit blemishes, have the client write a letter of explanation. So yes, if the client has credit blemishes, have your client write a really convincing letter of explanation on what they are doing to get out of the debt and how they will never get here again and how they're going to pay their rent on time. There is no reason to have your client pay for an application, application after application. If the landlord is willing to work with your tenant, then have them pay for the credit and background check. So what did I just say? As an agent, it is your job to help your clients keep money in their pocket. So for example, now you have their credit report, you have the application, you have your letter of explanation. If you needed it, you send this information over to the listing agent and you tell the listing agent, hey, my client is willing to pay for the background check and the credit report. But if you're not going to choose my client, we would prefer not to continue to spend money on application after application. And most real estate agents should understand that. Need to know with tenants and landlords. An agent cannot explain the tenant's report to the landlord. So you cannot go over the credit report. Now, you might need to have an understanding so you can negotiate on their behalf with the listing agent, but it is the landlord's job to look over the report. Now, can a property manager look over the report? Yes. So for those of you that in your heads are thinking, well, I'll just be the property manager. Talk to me first. Always talk to the managing broker first, because there are different insurances for property management, and a property manager is more likely to get sued and fined by IDFPR in our state than any other real estate activity. So that's why you have the landlord look over the credit report. Never share a credit report with a social security number on it. If your clients do annualcreditreport.com, the social security number should not be there. This is a violation of the Social Security Administration, and this is why we use mysmartmove.com. So mysmartmove.com allows you to do a credit and background check, and the listing agent might ask you to pull the credit. So if you create your own account, doesn't cost you anything to create this account, you will email it directly to the landlord. So you can even offer to pull credit for your client, and then you could share this with the listing agent and say, we use MySmartMove, which is a credit and background service. We've already pulled the credit for your landlord, and then this way your client doesn't have to keep paying application after application. But let me say this, you might have an agent that says, well, my landlord still wants to pull it. You can, when you use this, you can go with the minimum cost. When I worked for a bigger brokerage, the brokerage told us this was the cost. It is what it is, even though my smart move could be like 15 bucks. So the benefit of doing this is you show value to your client, and you can help move the process along a lot faster without using the annual credit report. Know your rights. Tenants need to know their rights. As an agent, you may get a phone call from your client that has already moved into the property and you have a bad landlord. Send them to the HUD website. know your website. You could literally go to HUD.gov and then just search your state. In our state, it's Illinois. You might have a friend that calls you from another state. So make sure your clients they understand their rights when working with a landlord, because there are things that tenants may not understand. Like, for example, if depending on the lease, your tenants might have the right to repair the furnace and then take a credit on their rent. Now, you don't offer that, but your tenants need to go and read those rules. If you're a new agent or if you've never read the rules for tenants' rights, please go to this website and look it up, because this will help you understand what landlords need to know, that the tenant is more protected if you're working with a landlord. And a tenant needs to know what happens when the landlord, some cities make the landlord keep the water bill in their name, and what happens if the water bill isn't paid. Your tenants need to know their rights. Now, at this point, I'm just going to tell all of you, please post your questions in the feed and I will answer them later. If you are listening to this somewhere else, you can DM me, you can text me in my office, you can email me if you have more questions. Yeah, so everyone have a great day, and when you're going to work with tenants, work smarter, not harder.